the best way to prepare for a listing appointment is to ask the seller some questions. Some people call it to pre-qualify the seller.
And do you just automatically go out? Your eyes got really big and you looked at me like, that's ridiculous. Like, why would I ever do that, right?
Well, some people would say, yes, I'm going to list my home with you. And I would go over and ruin the presentation because I was presenting in a way where it wasn't conducive to taking a lot of listings. I've seen agents that are like, dude, they said, yes, they're going to list their home with me. And then I ask them when they come back, they're like, no, I didn't take it. And I'm like, well, what happened? You can still ruin the presentation. At that point, you're just trying to increase the chances.
Welcome back, Novello Nation, to another episode of the Aaron Novello podcast. On this episode, myself and my boy, Mr. Jose Luis Morales, are going to have an in-depth conversation about how to prepare for the listing appointment, right? And what I'm aware of is, preparing for a listing appointment is critically important if you want to be effective and efficient. According to the Association of Realtors, if an agent goes on 100 listing presentations, they only actually take 20 listings. And that's pretty interesting. It's only a 20% conversion ratio. Now, my personal conversion ratio is about 80, 85%. I know Jose's is similar. And, we worked on that over an extended period of time as he was coming up in the game. And now he's a listing machine. So, I'm excited to have this conversation and add value to the community. How about you, Jose?
I'm excited too, because I think it'll help a lot of people. I remember back in the day, bro, when I used to get a listing appointment, I would be so nervous because I didn't know how to prepare for the listing appointment, or I didn't know what to do at the listing presentation. So I think that this will help a lot of people, bro. So
yeah, 100%. What comes to mind, I remember having conversations with you, when we first started working together, where you felt like, man, I'm like half the presentations I'm having to go back a second time, right? And it was just not it was like inefficient. You had the hustle, you had the will. It was just that you're spinning your wheels a lot, right? Going on a lot of these presentations and not getting the desired outcome. And once we made a little tweaks, right? One of them specifically being pre-qualifying upfront so we can gather as much information as possible and also use the pre-qualification in preparation for going on the listing presentation as a mechanism to sell, which we'll get into and kind of assumptively close. Then you started to convert at higher and higher levels. So let's walk through this, bro. When somebody reaches out to us or when we're cold calling and we set an appointment, talk to me about, the preparation that goes into that. So when somebody says like, yeah, come over, do you just like run over right away and you're like, all right, cool, I'll see you at 3?
No, not at all. And I think that's what I used to do at the very beginning. Like somebody would call me or I'd call them. They're like, hey, I want to sell my property. And I'd want to go over there immediately. But the best way to prepare for a listing appointment is to ask the seller some questions. Some people call it to pre-qualify the seller. Some people call it like an input. I've heard it like, they're like, oh, I have an input form where I ask the sellers a series of questions. So basically, the best way that I learned how to prepare for a listing appointment is to pre-qualify the seller, ask them a series of questions about their situation so that you know what you can do to be a best service to them. So it starts off with a transition. Like let's say that you set the appointment. So there's a 5-step listing process, and we went over that in our last video. Step number 1, you set the appointment. Incoming call, outbound call, set the appointment. Step number 2, you pre-qualify them, meaning you ask them that series of questions. Step number 3, you send a pre-listing package, meaning some information, which we'll cover in this video. Step number 4, you call to confirm. And step number 5, you present. You follow this process, it increases the chances of you taking the listing, and it also improves your listing presentation ratio, meaning based on how many listings you're going on, how many of you're taking, and how many of them are you taking on the first try. So the pre-qualification starts with transitioning from setting the appointment to transitioning to the script. This is the way I usually like to do it. I say, well, look, Aaron, before I come out, there are a number of questions I need to ask you. I just want to make sure that I'm fully prepared for our meeting and I could really be a best service to you. Is it okay if I ask those questions now? And my intention in asking that in that manner is that the series of questions is really all about them and helping them achieve their goals and helping them get closer to whatever it is that they want to do. So, Aaron, walk us through, man, what happens after you transition, bro?
Yeah. So, and I love that. And as I'm getting ready to walk through, I'm more than happy to do that. When I asked you, like, hey, when somebody calls and just says like, or you're make an outbound call and you book an appointment, do you just automatically go out? Your eyes got really big and you looked at me like, that's ridiculous. Like, why would I ever do that? Right. So it's important for people to understand that when me and Jose are saying that we do this every single time, it is absolutely every single time without exception. Right. Because in my professional experience, in those times when I imagined that I was going to make an exception, it never ends up working and out in my favor. And it's not a productive use of time. So if we're either making outbound calls or it's an inbound call and we book an appointment, in preparation for connecting, Jose, I just have a couple really quick questions to ask you just to make sure that I'm fully prepared and I could be of the best assistance to you and your family. And I'll be brief because I know your time is valuable. So notice there, like I didn't ask permission. I'm like, we're doing this and I'm going to be quick, right? So then we can transition. And they're like, sure, right? And in my mind, the way that I'm thinking about this in pre-qualification, I think a lot of people use pre-qual in the wrong way. They use it as disqualification, right? And that's not really the purpose of pre-qual. The purpose of pre-qual is to gather information, the who, what, where, when, why, and how with regards to this prospective move. And also use it as a mechanism to gather, potential objections that may come up, things that you have to be prepared for when you meet with them, whether they're going to meet with another agent, whether they're going to ask you about the professional fee or the length of the agreement or things of that nature, or what are you going to do to market the home? And then also a little bit more advanced as we start to assumptively close and move things forward. So once we say that phrase to transition, then they're like, sure. And then I start to systematically ask questions. And in everybody's mind that's watching this, I want you to think about this as though there's like a door and it leads to another room. And we don't leave one door until we don't leave one room until we are complete in one of the rooms. And what the rooms are motivation, time, and decision makers. So what's the specific motivation? So once they say okay to asking, sure, like it's okay, ask me questions. So the first question I have, Jose, is I'm very familiar with your geographic area. I'm sure your home is lovely, right? Hopefully I'm not being too straightforward. Was there any particular reason you and your family were even considering selling? And what is that question around, Jose?
It's all about the motivation right there. That's getting into the motivation now. What comes up to me when we talk about motivation, and this is what where some people get caught up, they'll read a script and the script will say, when you sell this home, where are you moving to next? But like, if you already talked about that in the appointment, like you may not have to like say, hey, Jose, like when you sell this property, where are you moving to next? Because they might be like, Jose, look, I literally just told you like 3 seconds ago that I'm moving to Arizona. Instead, you can rephrase the question and say, well, look, Jose, I know that when we spoke, you were kind enough to mention to me that you're looking to move to Arizona because you want to be out and be closer to family. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Yes, that is correct.
Perfect. And then right behind that, to dig into motivation, a question like, well, and tell me, because my job is to help you. It's never to talk you into doing anything. Is it an option for you, Jose, to not sell this home and still move? Like maybe like rent it or just keep it as a secondary home? And then quiet. Because I don't want to leave that room of motivation yet until I'm clear that the motivation is very strong. Because as we're taping this, we're in an environment in which economically things are changing, and it's going to become very, very important. One of the key critical skills that we need as agents is this ability to pre-qualify at a high level and to be able to kind of flesh out 8, 9s, and 10s in motivation. Because if it's not a compelling kind of reason as to why they're going to sell some sort of life event, then they're probably not going to be willing to put up with a difference in market dynamics and perhaps a difference in their expectations as to how much they're going to be receiving on their home versus what they could have got, 6 to 12 months ago.
Now, this is another thing, like you have to be listening to when you're having the conversation with their client. Like let's say in the appointment, they tell you, oh, this is a rental property for me, or this is a property that is an estate. You're not going to say, Jose, once you sell this property, where are you moving to next? Because that doesn't make any sense, And I hear that all the time.
Do you remember when we were like Yeah, do you remember we were role playing one time and I was like, Jose, and you're like, what? I'm like, you have a really good brain, bro. And you're like, uh-huh. I'm like, you should use it. And you were like, whoa, because you were doing that.
Because you get so caught up in like, okay, what does the script say next? Instead of like, okay, he already told me that this is an investment property for him and that, or that this is an estate. So you have to ask yourself, what you're really looking for is the motivation. And there's different ways to dig for this motivation. So if I'm talking to somebody that owns a rental property, instead of saying, where are you moving to next? I'm going to say, well, once you sell this property, are you looking to reinvest the proceeds into something else? Or are you just looking to cash out on this investment? What am I looking for right there? I'm looking for motivation. So if they say I'm looking to reinvest the proceeds, I may ask like, okay, great. And once you do that, are you looking to reinvest those proceeds here locally, or are you looking to move that money somewhere else? No, I'm actually looking to move it out of California. Okay, great. Now I've got some sort of sense as to what the motivation is. I can continue to dig deeper on that. Or if they say, no, look, I'm just looking to cash out, you may ask like, okay, great. And if you don't mind me asking, like why cash out on the property, and why not just keep the property as a rental property? I mean, or you can say like, well, Jose, gosh, it sounds like a great rental property. I mean, it sounds like it's been producing tons of cash flow for you. Like, why not keep it versus cashing out? And then I'm like, well, look, I'm really tired of being the landlord. I'm tired of like having to manage this property. I want to simplify my life. Boom. What does that give you? Motivation. Starts to give you the reason why they want to do what they want to do.
That's exactly right. And when you break that word down, motivation, it's motive to take action. It's a reason for doing something. And it was interesting because as you're speaking, those exact things were coming up for me. It's like, well, I imagine this has been a really good rental for you. And I know the rental market's, been very strong over the last 12 months. So hopefully I'm not being too straightforward. Was there any particular reason that you wanted to cash out versus just continuing to be a landlord? And then quiet. And they'll tell you, well, like I got maxed out depreciation. I got to cash out and move on to something else. Okay, cool. And is your intention to do a 1031 exchange and then repurchase something else? Or are you just cashing out completely? So what me and Jose are demonstrating to you is we want to get very, very clear on the why first, motivation, right? The motive to take action, the reason why somebody's doing something. And personally, I'm not going to move on to my next line of questioning, which is around time, until I'm clear on that.
The other thing I wanted to point out, bro, is I've seen other scripts, and this is not me talking bad about anything else, but the way that we're teaching you guys to do it is I've seen other scripts that are like, the first question that they start off with is, if what I say makes sense and you feel comfortable and confident that I can sell your home, are you planning to list your home with me? And sometimes that's too direct of a question for some people. I remember when I would ask that, people would be like, well, Jose, look, I haven't even met you. I don't even know what you look like. I don't know anything about you. And it may come off like it's too strong. So the reason I like to start off as motivation is it gives me a little bit of time to better understand their situation. I'm still going to ask the question, if what I say makes sense, are you planning to list it with me? I'm just going to ask it at a different time instead of asking it at the very beginning, because it gives me a little bit of time to fully understand their situation and almost like make it more about them than about me.
100%.
And that's what you want to do.
And that's the key right there, is that it flips it, right? When I begin to ask questions about Jose and what he's looking to accomplish and why, and specifically why it's important to him at this stage in his life that he accomplish a particular goal or objective, what I'm doing is I'm coming from a place of contribution where my intention is to serve. If I lead with a question that's about taking, it's about me, that is very indicative of what my intention is. My intention is to take. It's not to serve. So we're still going to ask that question. We're just going to ask it in a different way that's more palatable, and we're going to ask it towards the end of the conversation, right? And I think that's a critical point for people to be aware of, because the tendency for a lot of people is to lead with I, me, and what's in it for me. And I think that's backwards. And to your point where it's like, hey, if what I say makes sense, and you feel comfortable, you plan to listen to me when I see you tonight at 6. That's like going on a blind date, knocking on the door and being like, hi, are we going to smash tonight? It's like, what? Like, I don't even know you, bro. Like, we didn't even have a conversation. We haven't gone out to dinner yet. Like we didn't even relax. You know what I'm saying? You got to build a little rapport first, right?
Yeah.
So, we wouldn't do that in other areas. So it's like, well, why are we doing it here? Right. So once we're clear on motivation and we're asking a lot of digging questions around motivation, and a key phrase there is, my intention is to help you. It's never to talk you into doing anything. So is it an option for you to not sell this home and still move? Maybe like rent it out or move, because I want to get that clarity. I see a lot of agents spend so much time spinning their wheels on people that aren't certain about what they want to do yet. And what's true is that the bad leads or warm leads, okay leads, they hide the great ones. They hide the people that are like, Jose, I'm definitely selling. I want to get on the market in 30 days. It's not an option for me not to sell. Okay, great. We're dropping everything. We're going to move things around and we're going to meet with you because it's very clear that, you have a need that we can service. So once we're clear on motivation, then we start to move to time, right?
I wanted to add a couple things on the motivation before we move on to time. Understanding the motivation can actually help you prepare for the appointment. I'll give you guys a couple of quick examples. Let's say that they say that they're doing a 1031 exchange. You can dig a little bit deeper. You can say, well, great, do you already have a 1031 exchange company, or would you like for me to recommend somebody? Boom. What are you doing right there? You're adding value to their situation. Adding value. If they say, great, I'm moving to Texas. Great. Do you already have an agent out there? Would you like for me to make a recommendation out there? So whenever you're going out to the appointment, now you've got all this information and it's helped you better prepare for that appointment and add value. Now you're going to that listing presentation, not from what can I take from them? It's like, how am I adding value? So you add enough value at the presentation, you're going to be the one that ends up taking the listing because you're adding value. So when you're digging for the motivation, pay attention to things where you can add value for them. And also pay attention. Yeah, and also pay attention to things like, for example, like if they say, well, I've got this concern or that concern, those are going to be problems that you can help them find solutions to. So for example, if they say, well, look, I need to relocate out of the area, maybe you can help them find a great agent. If they say, well, look, I'm kind of concerned because I don't have the property ready to come on the marketplace, maybe you can help them prepare the property ready for sale. So it's going to help you prepare for the appointment and what to bring to the appointment and how to present at the appointment as well too.
Agreed. Yeah. I just went on a listing presentation this week. She interviewed 4 people, hired your boy. Let's go. And it was interesting because as we were speaking, she told me that she was making a move across country. I said, great. And, I know that that's a big move. Do you need any help or assistance with actually like boxing stuff up and shipping it or maybe putting stuff into a pod? She's like, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. I said, great. Well, what I'll do is I'll do a group text just so you know, anybody that I refer you to, there's no financial incentive for me to do that. These are just people that we work with all the time and know and trust. And because we refer them so frequently, they treat our clients exceptionally well and give them very reasonable rates and service. So I will connect you guys in a group text and then you guys could take it from there. And if it works out, great. If not, we can perhaps refer you to somebody else. Would that be helpful or useful to you? Oh yeah, that'd be great. So to your point, as we're asking questions around the move and finding out motivation, it's also a way to try to determine how you can add value above and beyond just helping them transact. So what me and Jose are talking about here is moving away from being transactional to being fiduciary. Transactional is just like, hey, I help you transact, I help you buy and sell. Fiduciary is I help you solve problems, and then I guide, right? And those are 2 different things. And I think the marketplace increasingly is beginning to demand fiduciary versus just transactional. Because if an agent's just going over, they're saying, we're going to take pictures, put a lockbox on, some flyers, and put an MLS and, hope and wish and pray that it sells, you're not adding that much value, and anybody can do that. So to Jose's point, it's really, going above and beyond that. So then we start to shift into time. And the question is why is time important? Well, for those people that are listening, how many people do you speak to and they say, yeah, I want to sell in like 6 months? And you're like, hey, cool. But, at the same time, who would you rather be speaking to? Somebody wants to sell in 6 months or somebody wants to sell in 30 to 45 days? So I need to know this before I go see them instead of running out, getting all dressed up, going in a car and being like, I think I can, and all excited about the presentation. And then you sit down with them and they're like, yeah, we're not going to do anything for 6 to 12 months. We just wanted to get an idea of value. So the questioning there sounds something like, ideally, Jose, in terms of what you want, because really that is what's most important, how soon would you like to actually have the home on the market for sale? And that's a quick, straightforward question. And they're going to give you an answer. It's either going to be ASAP, it's going to be in 30 days, it might be in 6 months, but each one of those is going to have a response. And what I'm looking for is a way of creating urgency, right? So let's say they say to me, well, we're thinking like in the next 90 days. Okay, cool. And then just so I know, is there any particular reason that you wanted to wait 90 days? Like, was there some sort of factor that was inhibiting you doing so? And they're like, yeah, well, we wanted to get it prepared and this and that. It's like, okay, cool. And let's say that we knew that through no fault of your own or mine, just because of some market dynamics and how things have been changing and interest rates going up, dramatically in a short period of time, that if we made a decision to wait, it could end up affecting how much we can get. Would you be open to moving up your time frame so you could take advantage of current market conditions? Or are you committed to waiting the 90 days and then be quiet? And when you do that, something will come back, right? So I'm always trying to listen for that time frame, and depending on the time frame, trying to figure out if there's a way that we can kind of move up the time frame that would be in their best interest if they're open to it.
It's funny, as you were talking, I was like thinking, like, a lot of people look at time and they're like, well, they don't want to sell in a period of 6 months. Well, have you asked them if they're open to moving up the time frame? And a lot of people think like, well, if they want to sell in 6 months, I'm not going to meet with them now until they're closer to doing it. Or they go out, meet with them, give a full listing presentation, and the people aren't ready to do anything. And then they start shopping you around as well, too. Sometimes they're like, well, that guy said he's going to charge me 6%. That guy said he's only going to sell it for 200,000 or 500,000. 6 months later, the market's completely different than it was today. Now properties are worth 10, 20, 30, 40,000 more, or 10, 20, 30, $50,000 less as well too. So I wrote that down as well too, that you can move up the time frame. What I also wrote down is that get clarification, meaning like sometimes people will say, well, yeah, I like to sell my property in around June timeframe. So the way I get clarification on that, when you say June, are we talking about like getting it on the market in June? Or are we talking about like actually having it closed and sold by June? Because those are completely two different conversations, No, I like to have it sold by June. It's May 21st today. That's like in like 9-10 days. That's a completely different conversation. And whenever people tell me their time frame, it's always like, okay, great. Well, I want to do something by July. Okay, when you say July, do you want to be closed by July, or are you talking about getting it on the market by then? And then it's also an opportunity to kind of pitch things. So for example, like if they want to have it on the market by August, you can pitch, well, great. If there was a financial benefit to doing something now versus waiting, meaning market transitioning, is that something that you'd be open to? If they say, no, I wouldn't be open to it, it's also an opportunity for you to pitch other things. Like, so for example, they say, no, I want to have it on the market in July and I want to be closed around September. You can pitch a rent back, meaning, well, look, what if we could actually get it on the market now, get you sold, and get the buyer to do some sort of sell or rent back to you? Would you be open to that? The other thing that you can pitch at that time is like a coming soon campaign as well too. Hey, look, I know that you're not wanting to be on the market until September. Have you ever heard of a coming soon campaign? No, I have not. Okay, well, coming soon campaign is very similar to a movie trailer. Have you ever gone to the movies and you see a movie preview of a movie that's coming to theater soon, and you think to yourself, when that movie comes to theaters, I want to see that movie. It's the same thing for real estate. What we do with a lot of our listings is we begin to pre-market our properties prior to them coming on the market. That way, just like a movie preview, we've already got a certain level of interest, and we've already got a certain level of buzz and excitement for your home, so that when it comes on the market, is that something that you're open to? That doesn't mean that you can't take the listing now, and that doesn't mean that they won't sign a contract now. This is the time to plant the seed, or almost start having that conversation, as opposed to having it at the listing appointment when you're presenting a new idea to them. It's enough, well, oh wow, I'd actually be interested in a rent back, or oh wow, I actually consider, or I didn't know I had a rent back available. I would consider a coming soon campaign as well too.
Yeah, I love that. And this is what we're showing. It's just continuing to dissect and continuing to ask more questions. To be clear, what came up for me is precisely what you were describing, the coming soon campaign. And what I will say is, something that we've done very successfully, for sellers just like you, that has produced very favorable outcomes for them, is, let's say we connect and it all makes sense and you feel comfortable and confident. We can take care of the appropriate documentation. We're not going to put it on the market for sale just yet. What we'll do is we'll begin to pre-market the property. We'll let people know via social media and different channels that's getting ready to come on the market. The goal and objective there is to build up a lot of interest, kind of a lot of buzz. So when it is ready in 2 or 3 weeks or a month, we just have the professional photographer come out and we open up the floodgates, and hopefully that results in a lot of showings and offers. I guess I'm curious, is that approach something that you would be open to? And then quiet. And they'll tell you like, yeah, it sounds great. Okay, cool. Right. The other thing is what came up as you were speaking is, so let's say they say 90 days. It's like, all right, well, and tell me this, like, let's say we were able to procure an offer for you in the next 30 to 45, and we can negotiate an extended closing period of maybe, 60 days or something of that nature. Is that a time frame that you would be open to? Yeah, I think we could work with that. Okay, great. And now I'm clear, right? So what me and Jose are both saying is that as we enter into the motivation room, we ask a lot of questions, we dig, we dissect, we don't take surface answers, we're continuing to ask questions. So that way we're very, very clear on the motivation. Like if you hang up a pre-qualification call, or if you're going on a listing appointment and you can't tell me with exact certainty, specifically the why and why it's important to them, then you didn't do a good job of pre-qualifying, and you should reach back out to them and find out before you go see them, right? Because otherwise you're also not able to understand their situation fully, and then therefore prescribe something that could be in their best interest fully and help them to self-discover what could, be in their best interest. Then we move over to time, and the same thing's happening there, is that me and Jose are not taking surface answers for time. We're continuing to dig, continuing to ask questions to find out, hey, is there an opportunity here to do something sooner rather than later? And then once we're clear on that, the next thing we move over to, for me, is decision makers. Right? Because I want to be clear that all decision makers are there. I'm sure we've all been there where we run out to an appointment and we realize that they're like, oh yeah, it's typically the husband be like, my wife's on the deed, but I make all the decisions. And then you get there and they're like, I got to talk to my wife. I'm like, yeah, I knew you had to talk to your wife, bro. Like, why are you flexing like that? You know what I mean? Like, you're not the real decision maker, dude. So I want to make sure that everybody's present. And the way that we ask that question is, I can see here, it looks like there's somebody else on title to the property. Just so I know, I can hear in your voice, you seem to be really excited about selling. How does Jim feel about it? Or how does Susie feel about it? Right? And then just hush, breathe, and listen. And they'll tell you. They'll be like, yeah, she's equally as pumped. She wants to be closer to family. Or yeah, he is the one that's causing me to want to do this move. He has a job opportunity or something of that nature, right? More information will be forthcoming when you ask that question. I saw you write some notes down, so tell me what you got.
I was thinking about price as well too. Like normally I go into like, okay, how much do you want to list the property for at that time? But it's basically the same thing. It's just a different order, because I'm imagining that you ask in regards to price as well too. As it relates to decision makers, I do want to let people know that I have had some exceptions that I make on something like that, where it's like, hey, look, my wife's actually out of town. This is the way I want to do it. I want to meet you first. If I like what you have to say, I'll introduce you to my wife. And in some of those cases, I just want to let you guys know that you are the business owner. You get to make the business decision as to how you want to run your business. Don't make it the rule, but also don't draw a line in the sand, meaning like, nope, I'm not willing to do that. Nope, all decision makers are not there. I'm not going out to that appointment, especially as a newer agent as well too. Like, let's say, dude, you spent 3 weeks prospecting, you finally got a good lead, the guy wants to meet you first, you're like, nope, I'm not going out there. Dude, you don't have anything better to do, like it may as you become more productive, your time becomes more valuable. And as your time becomes more valuable, you want to go into situations where you're being more efficient, and also that increase the chances of you being able to help them do what they want to do as well too. So I just want to give a little bit of a different perspective on that as well too.
Yeah, I think there's accuracy in that, where it's the exception, it's not the rule.
Exception, yeah.
So there's an exception a handful of times. At the same time, if we do that more often than not, then more likely than not, it'll lead to kind of spinning wheels.
Yeah.
And as I get more productive, I know me and you typically are not going to be listing 100 plus homes a year. Like, I'm not going to be meeting with people if all decision makers aren't there. I may make an exception 1 or 2 times out of 150 listings, but it is the exception, right? So once I'm clear on that, we have all decision makers present. Then we start to get into some other questions. Now, Jose mentioned regarding price. Now, the way some people have been trained to do that is, I study prices every day, so therefore I assume you'll list with me at a specific price that'll cause it to sell. Is that correct? And what I'm aware of is that's built in an environment in which consumers didn't have access to data and information. Well, there's this thing called the internet, and that's come around over the last 20, 25 years. And now people have access to data and information. They probably know more about home values than most agents do. Mm-hmm. So like that question doesn't make sense in the environment that we live in now. It's built for a different environment. So the way that I ask that question is like, Jose, you strike me to be someone who's pretty savvy. So I'm sure you've been online, looked at some of these sites that give estimates of value. So I'm wondering, did you have an idea of realistically what you were thinking in terms of price? Now, the way we say it that way is very specific reasons. You strike me to be someone who's pretty savvy. Everybody loves a compliment. Flattery always works. They're like, yeah, you're damn right. I am. I'm pretty savvy, right? And then once I asked that, and it's like, yeah, and I'm sure you've been to some of these sites. Notice I'm not mentioning names because those guys are trying to eat our lunch, so I'm not going to give them free promotion. I'm sure you've been to some of those sites that give estimates of value. So did you have an idea at all of realistically? Now, the reason why I use that specific word is that everything about after the word realistically has to be realistic. So did you have an idea at all of realistically what you were thinking in terms of price? And then be quiet. And they're going to tell you something. It's either going to be a variation of a few things. One is going to be like, yeah, we were thinking this. Or one is, well, I kind of want to hear what you have to say first. Right? So it's kind of a variation of a few things, but that's really the only responses that you're going to get. I want to hear what you have to say, like that sort of thing. So let's say they say to you, well, yeah, we were thinking this. Okay, great. And I appreciate your willingness to share that. My intention in asking is really just to gauge your expectation. My goal and objective, provided the opportunity, is to help you maximize value and get you every penny possible. I'm also of the mindset, Jose, I'd much rather earn your business with integrity, being honest and straightforward about what's reasonable and realistic versus promising you something I know is not going to happen and not be able to deliver. So in preparation for us connecting, myself and team and staff are going to be doing a lot of homework, and we're going to send you an email to your email address. And in that email, amongst other things, will be an updated market analysis that I'll bring with me during our time together. And what we'll look at is what's active on the market right now and not selling with pictures so we can compare apples to apples. Then we'll look at what has sold and closed most recently, because of course, as you know, what something's worth is what somebody's willing to pay and what they had to offer and how much they got. And from all of that information, we're going to determine together as a team, not a pinpoint to the penny in terms of price, but instead a very tight, realistic range as to what would be reasonable. Does that approach make sense to you? And they're going to be like, yeah, makes perfect sense. And also what I'm doing there and how I'm structuring that, I'm including them in the decision making. I think the training and what people would receive previously was like, I know and you don't. But that exists for a world in which consumers don't have access to data, where I can go in and be like, I know and you don't. And that's not the world that we live in now. So instead, this approach is very much so coming from a place of inclusion. It's like, look, this is your property. I know you have access to data. I know you're checking these sites every day. So what we're going to do together as a team is we're going to look at this data. And as specialized knowledge becomes, like as information becomes free, specialized knowledge becomes more valuable. So I'm here just to help you to interpret and to consult. And ultimately, you're the boss. You'll decide how we wish to proceed. And whatever you decide, I'll support you.
Agreed. And then when you're digging for the price, just know that they don't have to give you like an exact number as to what they want to list it at. You just have to have some sort of indication as to where they want to be. Meaning, like if they say, well, look, my neighbor's house sold at 700,000. I think mine's better. So I'm thinking higher than 700,000. Boom. You've got some indication as well, too. And then also sometimes what they'll say is, and you kind of covered this already, they'll say, well, we want to hear what you have to say about price as well too, and what most agents typically do is they'll say, well, like as a professional real estate agent, I study homes and prices every day. Therefore, I assume that you'll list with me at a price that'll cause it to sell. So what price won't you go below? And the problem is that as soon as you say, like, what price won't you go below? Like, imagine being on the receiving end of that. Imagine you are the person that they're like, what price won't you go below? And it's like, well, I thought you were my fiduciary. I thought you were my real estate agent. I thought you're trying to help me get top dollar for my property. Why do you want to know what price I won't go below? And it creates like this like mixed messaging where like you're telling them that you're going to help them and you're telling them that you're going to help them get top dollar. And then your messaging over here is like, well, what price won't you go below? Like,
yeah. And I led with a question of, you're going to listen to me when I see you, and what price won't you go below? It's very clear what the intentions are behind that, which is like, this is about me, and I'm interested in like, what's the lowest amount that you're willing to sell the property for, instead of coming from a place of contribution, which is like, look, we're going to look at this together as a team, and I'm going to give you some options that you have at your disposal, and whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%. I want you to know that our interests are in alignment. Obviously, we get compensated more the more we help you sell it for. At the same time, again, I'm committed to earning your business with integrity versus promising you the moon and not being able to deliver. Does that sound fair? And they're like, yeah, that sounds super fair. And now we're like in alignment, right? It's kind of like if I came up to you and you were, I don't know, selling your car or something. Like the first thing I said to you was like, hey, what price won't you go below? It's like, screw you, buddy. Like, what do you mean? What price won't I go below? Now it's very clear to me, like you're trying to like take from me instead of trying to contribute and add value to me.
Yeah. And then there's also more basic ways of asking for price. Like a very basic way is like, yo, or Aaron, when I see you, how much did you want to list your home for? It's very simple. So it's like, and this is the room. This is another room. Now in the room, we're focusing about price, and that's all we're talking about. And sometimes whenever they say, well, look, Jose, we actually would like to keep that information confidential. We want to hear what you have to say first. We're going to take what you tell us and we're going to compare it to 2 or 3 other agents. Most agents will be like, okay, and then just like, okay, like they don't want to tell me a price. Instead, there are ways to handle that. And you described one. I'm going to share the way I handle it. I'll be like, well, look, Aaron, the reason I'm asking you about the price is more or less to gauge expectation. I want to make sure that you and I are on the same page. Let me give you an example. I had a seller last week tell me that they wanted me to tell them the price. We talk a little bit further. They tell me that they want $3 million for the property. I know realistically the property would only move for $1 million. I could tell you that over the phone, or I could tell them that over the phone. So in that case, it wouldn't make sense for me for us to meet. So I'm not asking what price do you want to tell you exactly what you want to hear and almost regurgitate that price right back to you. The reason I'm asking is just to make sure that our expectations are somewhere in line. So what were you thinking? And they're like, well, I was thinking somewhere around 700 to 750. Boom. That's all I need to know. I'm still, as the agent, I'm still going to do my own independent research. I'm still going to do my own market analysis. I'm still going to have my own opinion about the price as well, too. But at least I know what they're thinking now. And I want to make sure that they're somewhat in line. And like what happens? Like, okay, so what if they want $1 million and their property's only worth 750? Like,
we need to have a conversation before I come and see you. Like I would do a second pre-qualify and be like, hey, I'm, really doing my best to support, your expectation and what you want. At the same time, I'm not seeing data to, show me that that's an accurate assessment of things. So what I'd like to do is go over some of the recent sales in hopes that can help you to decide what you feel is best. Because again, as I mentioned to you in preparation for connecting, my job's to help you. It's never to talk you into doing anything. So and then you go over that information. Did you know that? And then say they're like, well, damn it, and I won't. And then what I would say is so let's say you knew that through no fault of your own or mine, which is a key phrase, right? So through no fault of your own or mine, the marketplace is showing us that buyers and sellers have been agreeing for $750 for your home. And those recent sales were in the last 30, 60, 90 days. If you knew that that's what it would be required, around that price point is what it would take to actually get the home sold, do you think you would still proceed with selling, or would you try to figure out a different option, maybe renting it or staying put or something of that nature? And then they're going to tell me that. And I'd rather them tell me that before I get in a car and go drive them and talk to them for an hour about, the situation.
And this is one of those things that, like, this might be one of the rooms that I walk back into, Aaron. I know that we don't move into another room until we're done with that conversation. And the reason I would say this is, like, let's say that you look at the comps, or the area really well, and you know that everything is selling around 700, but let's say they want 799. But let's say that you walk into the other room and the other room's they say, you ask them, would you describe your home for me? Meaning like, what is the condition of the property? And let's say that they tell you, I've got a guest house in the back that brings in $3,000 of rental income. Is there a possibility now, if everything's selling at 700, that they could get that 800,000? So like, whenever they tell me the price there, like regardless of what the price is, I don't question it until I know what the condition of the property is. So for example, like there's still going to be a couple of other rooms that we're going to walk into. And then when I go into the condition of the property, I'm looking for like, hey, look, like, can we, because I remember like talking to a seller and the guy goes, yeah, I want like 800,000. I'm thinking like, dude, no way you're going to get 800,000. And then that's what I'm thinking in my head. And then he tells me I've got a guest house. I know that guest houses are extremely rare in that community. And he starts telling me that his house is fully decked out and that the guest house brings in $2,000. Now I'm like, there's a chance you might be able to get that 800,000, even though it's $100,000 more than anything that is sold in the community, because you do have that extra dwelling at the property. So that might, in my situation, I might want to walk back into that room. Now, if once they describe the home to me and there's not enough, like it's not there, then we can have that conversation as well too, as to, hey, look, I'm not finding any data that supports that price.
Agreed. And I think there's two rooms that we could potentially go back into. One is what you described as far as what the property has to offer. The second is his motivation. So I'm less like concerned about, what they're telling me price-wise, as long as the motivation's strong, because motivation always fixes price. So if they were to say to me, I want 790, and I asked them in the motivation room, is it an option for you to not sell the home and still move? And they're like, no. Is it an option for you to rent the home and still move? And they're like, no. And if you don't mind me asking, was there any particular reason you were even considering selling? I have a new job and they want me out there in the next 90 days. Okay. Like that person's moving. So even though they're saying to me like this, it's not an option for them not to sell, and it's not an option for them to rent it and still move. So, we're still going to have a conversation with them for sure. So there's two rooms that you can revisit. One is what the property has to offer, and two is motivation. I know that was a good point. That's why that ringer went off.
And the key there, bro, is that motivation fixes price. A lot of people they want 800,000. The home's only worth 700,000. But if their motivation is strong enough, like they're gonna sell regardless, and it's either gonna be with you or somebody else. And motivation is really the key to taking a lot of listings. You want to get in front of people that are motivated to do something, not people like, yeah, if it happens, great. If it doesn't, then that's okay too,
Exactly. Yeah. So good. So then we have this conversation. If they push back at you, like we said, we asked them about price, like how did you, I'm sure you've been to some of these sites to give estimates of value. So did you have an idea at all of realistically what you were thinking in terms of price? And they'll tell you, and then you'll say like, okay, great. And then in terms of the property, have you done any changes or modifications to the inside that you believe would affect its value? Examples being like kitchen, bathrooms, or flooring. Because to Jose's point, what he just said, I need to know this information as myself or staff are doing a CMA, because that's going to allow us to get a realistic range. Again, not a pinpoint to the penny, but a tight range as to what's going to be reasonable or realistic based on terms and conditions. Based on, features and amenities that the home has to offer. And then what I do is like, as we're talking about this, I'll kind of guide them. So in Florida, there's certain things they'll be like, yeah, this and this, like, okay. And how about in the kitchen, like countertops, cabinets, appliances, any changes or modifications there? And they'll be like, oh yeah. Like, okay, now how about flooring? Is it tile or wood or carpet? How about the bathrooms? Any like vanities, commodes, showers, any changes there? And I'll pull it up on Google Map and I'll be like, yeah, I'm very familiar with your community. I'm pretty sure like your property backs up to a body of water. And they're like, whoa, how'd you know that? It's like, I'm a magician. There's this thing called the internet, right? So, and then like major, like heating and cooling systems, the bones, like a AC, water heater, roof, any issues there. And in Florida, hurricane impact windows is a thing. So I'll be like, hey, do you have hurricane impact windows? No. Okay. And then the follow-up question to that is, do you plan on making any additional changes or modifications before I start to bring buyers through? And that's where we're like assumptively closing. Now we're not just gathering information, but we're starting to move the process forward.
The other thing, like the way I look at would you describe your home to me is I like to think about it like I want to ask enough questions until I'm able to visualize what their home kind of looks like from the inside or what their home kind of looks like in my head. So I'll ask questions like, so for example, like I'll say like, okay, would you please describe your property for me? And then just like you, I'll guide them through different rooms. I'll say, have you done any upgrades? And or they'll say something like, well, yeah, my house is fully remodeled. Okay, great. When you say fully remodeled, do you mean that you've upgraded the kitchen? Yes, that means I've upgraded the kitchen. Okay, great. When you say you've upgraded the kitchen, does that mean that you redid the cabinetry, or does that mean that you repainted the kitchen cabinets and just resurfaced them? Because that makes a difference in our area. You know, if they spent $100,000 or $50,000 on brand new cabinetry versus if they just sanded the existing cabinets down, painted them, and put new doorknobs, that's a different style of upgrade. Okay, great. You mind me asking what kind of countertops you have? You mind me asking what type of flooring you have throughout the house? Sometimes they'll say like, okay, I've got this nice laminate flooring. Okay, you mind me asking what color is the laminate flooring? Because I want to see how modern or how outdated the property is going to feel. Because just because somebody has remodeled that property, that doesn't mean it's remodeled to today's standard. Meaning like, I could have remodeled my property 10 years ago. What if I remodeled my property back in the 1960s, bro? In the 1960s, that was hip. Today, I don't think that's as hip, you know, today, although some of the things are coming back now, you know, like wallpaper and some of those things, but still. So whenever I am asking them, I may even ask them, okay, you mind me asking when these upgrades were done? Oh, they were done 15 years ago. Okay, if I start to see like colors like in my area, like browns or like tans, that's not what's in right now. So it may still sell for a really good price, but it may not sell like if they had the white kitchen, if they had the light gray walls, they had the light gray floorings, that might sell at more of a premium because that is more in line with the styles that are happening right now. So I like to ask questions that are going to allow me to visualize what level of remodel they did, when they did the remodel, and almost like be able to visualize what it looks like from the inside. That way, when I'm doing my market analysis, once again, how to prepare for the listing appointment. Once I'm doing my market analysis, I'm looking for the comps that best reflect what they've just described to me. So now if they're telling me like, hey, look, I've got the property fully remodeled, they got this, this, and this, I'm trying to find the best comparables that match that. That way, when I'm presenting comparables, they're like, oh, yeah, that house is actually really similar to mine. Oh, that sold at 700. Oh, man, I guess my price of 800,000 may not be in line with where the marketplace is. And you're able to collect this information about the description by asking these questions. So how to prepare for a listing appointment really comes down to how well are you at pre-qualifying the seller or asking these questions, because this is going to tell you how to prepare for the appointment.
Yeah, 100%. And then that follow-up question, like, so as we're digging and they say like, yeah, I remodeled, and you're like, great. So approximately time frame wise, how long ago did you remodel the kitchen? So I can be clear, like when it was it 10 years ago? Was it a year ago? Right. And that'll give you an indication as to if it's modern or, you know, perhaps a little dated. And then if it sounds as though, based on what you shared with me, you don't plan on making any additional changes or modifications before I would start to bring buyers through. Is that correct? And that's where we're starting to assumptively close and kind of move the process forward. And they're like, no, I don't think so. Okay, great. And then I'm going to be preparing for you a net sheet, Jose, so that way we can determine for you dollars and cents what the proceeds will be when it all shakes out. In order to do that properly and professionally, just need a roundabout. Is there anything still owed on it, like any liens or encumbrances or mortgages, or is the property free and clear for you and your family? And then be quiet.
What I used to do, because there was a script out there that taught me that says like, well, Aaron, how much do you owe on the property? I would get so much pushback. So the way that Aaron phrased it is key right there. Like, you got to realize that the way that you phrase things is either going to get people defensive or they're going to be like, okay, that makes sense. And they're going to want to give you that information. So I used to ask him, how much do you own the property? And they would get very defensive with that. People would say like, well, why do you want to know? Why does that matter? Oh, I want, and then I would catch myself like almost having to explain things. Well, I want to prepare a net sheet. Oh, don't worry about the net sheet. I'll prepare the net sheet myself. Or just make the net sheet based on what that I owe zero, and then I'll do my own numbers on it. But by you asking that, sometimes that leads to a little bit of distrust. So by letting them know why you want to know how much they owe, it almost opens the door. I ask it in a very similar way where I say, well, Aaron, I want to prepare what's called the seller net sheet for you. This is going to let you know net bottom line, what you can expect to receive at closing after escrow, title, and any commissions. Is there still a balance still owed on this property, or is the property paid off free and clear? And
Yep.
typically what I get, they'll say, no, there's still a balance. It's about 400,000. Or they'll say, no, there's still a balance. Okay. You mind me asking roughly what that balance is? It's right about 350,000. Boom. So you got to remember, guys, that like whenever you're looking at a script, it's more about like a room and having different ways of asking the questions in a way where it doesn't get people defensive, but it still gives you the information that you want. So by us asking it that way, we're still getting the loan balance. We're just asking it in a way where it doesn't get people defensive instead of, Aaron, how much do you owe on the property? Why do you want to know? Why do you want to know how much I owe on the property?
How much do you owe? What price won't you go below? Or are you going to list with me when I see you? It's like, it's very clear, like what the intention is, right? Versus what we're doing here is I'm sharing with you not only why, but that it's in your best interest. So I'm going to be preparing a net sheet for you and your family. So that way you guys could see dollars and cents, what the proceeds would be that you can take with you to Oxnard, that you can take with you to Florida, that you could take with you to Texas. In order to do that properly and professionally, just need a roundabout. Is there anything still owed on it, like liens, encumbrances, or mortgages, or is it free and clear? And to your point, once you change the approach, when you create an environment that's conducive for a yes, and that's conducive for, somebody kind of engaging and perhaps sharing that information with you, then like 95% of the time they will. Versus the other one, which was like, large portion of the time they get defensive and they push back. But I need to know this information. And the reason I need to know this information is so that way I can help them, and for me to determine too, as we're doing this homework, just to ensure that there's an equity position, right? If they tell me that they need 100%, I need 100 grand, otherwise I can't move, and I know how much they owe on the property when we're doing the homework, if the homework doesn't support that, now it's time to do a second pre-qual, call them, tell them what I'm seeing, and have a conversation before we connect.
Now, a lot of people think that you win listings at the listing presentation. You can actually win the listings in the pre-qualification script, meaning that like depending on how they feel about the way that you're asking the questions, that is either going to give them a negative impression of them or a positive impression of them. I went on a listing presentation against one of my buddies, and obviously I took it,
This guy, obviously, let's go.
like a champ, But what they told me is that he asked very similar questions to what I asked. What they told me is that they felt like he was asking too many questions, or that it was too abrasive. And the reason is not that he was asking too many questions. It was the way that he was asking the questions was more about him versus them. So what I tell people is you can win or lose a listing presentation on the prequal, because they're either going to end that conversation with, man, that was a really pleasant conversation, or man, that guy asked me a lot of questions and it felt like an interview.
Felt like an interrogation.
Right? Now, this is a presentation as well, too. The prequal is a presentation. And because it is a presentation, it should be something that you're practicing, meaning something that you're practicing on how to deliver this in a way where it makes the consumer feel good. You collect the information that you want, and also it allows you to be fully prepared for the listing appointment.
100%, man. And what I'm aware of is I think a lot of agents imagine that the listing presentation is only when I physically go to their home. This is the beginning of the listing presentation. And to your point, if you do this right and you nail it, right, you nail the presentation, and then you send, which we will probably do another video on and talk about, like the pre-listing information that gets sent out before I go see them and some additional steps that we take, 80% of the decision's made before I even step foot in their home, right? I want to equip them with all the information that they need to make a decision before I even connect with them. And the reason why we're doing this is because we live in a world in which technology has changed our expectation, has changed our behavior on how we make decisions, right? And you're used to now in this day and age doing a lot of your own homework and coming to pretty much a conclusion before you speak to anybody, right? And I want to create the same environment for them. And then when I speak to them, then I show up dressed fresh like $1 million. And then what comes out of my mouth is, different than what other people are seeing. We're coming from a place of contribution. We're also ninja salespeople. Then, we convert at high levels. So we only have a couple more questions on this prequel that I want to get to. because I know everybody's time is valuable here. So once they say, like, yeah, here's how much we owe, great. And I'm imagining, based on what you shared with me, that you're not interested in acting like a bank and holding a note for a new buyer. You just want for me to help you to get all the cash out. Is that right? And they're going to be like, well, yeah, I mean, that's what I want, right? But that's just a way to assumptively close there, right? Do you want me to help you to get all the cash out? And they're usually going to be like, yeah, because very few people want to, hold a note. And then you say, okay, great. And then, my intention, provided the opportunity again, is to do a wonderful job for you and your family. So other than what we've discussed so far, somebody's got a great track record, somebody who can help you get top dollar, somebody who can help, refer you to someone, a vendor who can put stuff in a pod and ship it out to California, somebody who would look out for your best interests, make sure all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted, and somebody who could just execute and get it done for you. Is there anything else, Jose, you'd be looking from me as your agent that would be important to you? So that's another assumptive close, like as your agent, that would be important to you. And they're going to tell you, well, yeah, like how much is the commission? Or yeah, like we want to talk about this. Or yeah, we want somebody at this, and this. Okay, good. Well, I made a note of those things here, and we'll be sure to discuss them during our time together. Now, I'm aware that I'm just a voice over the phone at the moment, Jose. So in some information that I'm going to send you in preparation for connecting, in the signature of my email, there'll be a link to our website. Check that out, put a face to the name. There's also a link. There's these buttons you can click on where you can see all of our personal reviews online. We have over 530 five-star reviews from clients just like you that we've helped in your area from start to finish get the most. So I encourage you to take a look at a few of those, not all of them, but a few. So that way you can get a feel and a flavor for the service and results we provide, okay? And they're going to be like, yeah. Now, why are we doing that? Because we're reverse engineering how we have been trained through technology to make decisions, right? So let's say you and your wife are going to go out to dinner tonight. You don't know where to go. You're not going to pick up the phone and call somebody and be like, hey, man, what was the best restaurant you've been to? Like, no, you're going to go to your phone and then you're going to look at reviews and then you're going to watch a video and maybe look at pictures of the food. And then you're going to make a decision on who gets the check for $100, just like that. So what we're doing is we're reverse engineering that. We're pushing them to these digital assets that can help do the selling for us instead of us being like me, I, and I'm the best and I'm so great. Just let the tech do it for you. Let the digital assets, let the reviews, let your past clients who have left glowing reviews sell you to the consumer instead of you kind of verbally vomiting, telling people how great you are. And then I'll say, okay, and I've asked you a bunch of questions. Do you have any other questions or concerns for me? Quiet. And then they'll tell you like, okay, good. And then it leads us back to that final question, which is, all right. And then you strike me, Jose, to be someone who's super straightforward. I'm the exact same way. I can tell in speaking to you, you've really thought this through. And, it's not a question of if you're going to do this, it's just a question of when and who you're going to partner with. So when we do connect, provided that it makes sense, of course, numbers work. You feel comfortable and confident with me and my team that we can help. You do that due diligence. You check me out online. You see track record or see reviews. It seems as though you would be open to the possibility of hiring me to help when I see you tomorrow at 6. Is that right? And then quiet. And they're either going to say yes, no, or maybe. Oftentimes they'll be like, well, yeah, that's why I'm inviting you out. Okay, great. Right? If they say, well, we want to hear what you have to say, then cool. We can handle that. But let's say they say, yeah, I mean, we're open to it. Awesome. So what I'll do, Jose, is I'll bring with me the analysis that we'll send over via email. So that way we can look at that together as a team and figure out strategically how to position the property to make sure we get you guys top dollar. And then I'll also have with me the appropriate documentation, the listing paperwork. So provided that it all makes sense and you and your wife feel comfortable and confident, we can take care of that and get the process started. Fair enough? And they're like, yeah, that's fair, which is another close. It's like, look, I'm setting the expectation. Like when we meet, the expectation is that we're going to do business.
It's funny too. And now, whenever they do say yes, that doesn't mean that you've won the listing presentation, guys, because you still have to present in a good way. And we'll probably do a live listing presentation video for you guys. What I wanted to invite you guys is comment below. This video is not over because we're still going to talk about a couple things, but comment below what type of videos you guys would like to see. But the point I wanted to make that is because when I would get done pre-qualifying people, some people would say, yes, I'm going to list my home with you. And I would go over and ruin the presentation because I was presenting in a way where it wasn't conducive to taking a lot of listings. And it was like, no. And then I've been in situations where like, no, I'm not going to list my home with you. Just come over. I'll interview you. If I like you, we'll take it from there. And they do list the property with me. So don't get so caught up on that. No, they said no, or yes, they said yes. Because I've seen agents that are like, dude, they said yes, they're going to list their home with me. And then I ask them when they come back, they're like, no, I didn't take it. And I'm like, well, what happened? It just means that you might have said something at the presentation that maybe they didn't like, or maybe something wasn't handled the right way. So you can still ruin the presentation. At that point, you're just trying to increase the chances. The other thing is that whenever I say like Jose, look, I'm going to prepare what's called the marketing package of information. In this marketing package of information, I'm going to include the most recent comps. I'm going to include a copy of the plan of action, and I'm also going to include a link to our reviews. When I send it, will you take a few moments to review it? Yes. I actually give them a deadline of when that package is going to come. One, to keep me accountable, and two, to be able to deliver on one of my first promises to them. Meaning I'll say, you will receive that package by tomorrow at 5 p.m. Because one, I've seen where a lot of agents deliver this package or get this package to them, but they get it like 10 minutes before the presentation. That does not give the seller enough time to review it. So I like committing to a deadline, because one, it makes sure that that I give it to them and they have enough time to review it. And two, it gives me, like, it puts a little bit of pressure on me to get everything done as well too.
That's exactly right. And then what came up for me is like, if somebody's like, well, we're not sure yet. Like, okay. And I know it's a big decision. You want to make sure you're making the best decision possible. I mean this very humbly. I really do. Like 95% of the time when I meet with people in person, particularly when they see our track record and reviews, they do decide to hire me and put me to work. So what I'll do is I'll bring with me the analysis again, so we can review it together as a team and figure out strategically how to position it, the property that is, to make sure we're maximizing value and getting you top dollar. And I will also have with me the appropriate documentation. So provided that if, and I'm aware that is an if, you do feel comfortable, confident, then we can get the process started. Does that sound fair? They're like, okay, right? So, just kind of managing that expectation that is my intention when we connect. And then when we do like a live listing presentation, we can kind of walk people through how that is. So I want everybody to hear, hopefully this has been helpful or useful to you in some way. And what I want everybody to hear is that there's about 5 conversations that you have to master if you want to be a dominant listing agent. You want to list 100 plus properties a year, the way me and Jose do, individually, one at a time. It begins with setting appointments. It continues with the pre-qualification, right? And this is how you prepare for the listing presentation. There's a saying that says, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. Well, if you don't prepare properly and you don't ask these surgical questions, you're walking in essentially blind. And that is why, according to the National Association of Realtors, when an agent goes into a listing appointment, on 100 appointments, they'll only take 20 of those listings. When me and Jose go on listing appointments, we'll take 80 to 85 of those. So it's a difference of like, $5, $6, $7, $800,000 a year in income. And one of the main reasons is because of this particular skill. So hopefully this has been helpful or useful to you in some way. If you have liked this episode, be sure to smash the subscribe button. Be sure to like the episode, and then go ahead and share it. If you think there's other agents out there who could, benefit from our time together today, go ahead and do that. So be sure to look out for the next installment of these 5 kind of master level conversations about listing property in high volume. And what we'll be talking about on that one is, what information is being sent out before we go and see them, and that whole process, right? Because there is a SOP for that, a standard operating procedure. And we're more than happy to share that with you in hopes that it can help you in some way. So I appreciate you, Jose, as always a pleasure. I'm not sure if you have pants on, you may or may not sure, but whatever you're doing, keep it sexy. And look forward to reconnecting with you soon, brother.
Sounds good, my man. Appreciate you.
All right. Yep. Later.